Come next year, 2016, Rocky turns 40 years old, and it will do so with 7 films in its canon. It has been 9 years since the last installment, Rocky Balboa. And usually, the longer the wait, the less excitement there is for a new installment within a franchise. But with Creed, there is plenty of excitement. And for good reason. Creed. In my opinion, it's very good. The story follows Adonis Creed. After being adopted by his stepmother, he decides to follow in his father, Apollo's footsteps, and become a boxer. With some convincing, he recruits Rocky Balboa to be his trainer. The two then prepare for the fight that will let everyone know who Adonis is as a fighter. Creed comes from Ryan Coogler, who 2 years ago gave us Fruitvale Station. And upon leaving that movie, I just had this feeling in my heart that Coogler was going to go far, and I still believe that. And I made a mental note back then to watch all of his films after that, to stay with his career, no matter what kind of film he made. I am not a boxing fan myself, but when I read that he was making this movie, it really piqued my interest, and I was very curious what he would do with the material, given how it's a Rocky sequel of sorts. I have seen all the previous Rocky films, and while it's not on Blu-ray, I do very proudly own the Rocky Anthology, and despite not all of the films being great, what I love about the series in general is that it shows you what a truly driven person can accomplish. And Creed is that as well. Our main character Adonis is a driven fighter, and what I loved about this movie is what his fuel is for becoming a fighter. I won't spoil it, but it's a very strong and emotional idea, and when I learned what it was, it made me unquestionably root for him. I also loved the relationship that developed between Adonis and Rocky. And even though Rocky says no at first, you know he'll eventually come around and give in and be his trainer. And when he does, they form the most tender and beautiful bond you can imagine, and it just feels like it was meant to be. Without sounding cheesy, but that's just the way it felt. It felt like it was right. Another thing that was definitely meant to be is Felicia Rashad playing the mother of Adonis. As someone who has seen every episode of The Cosby Show, I can say with confidence that she is the quintessential mother actress, and was so perfect for this role. The most interesting dynamic for me, though, was between Michael B. Jordan and Tessa Thompson. It's a dynamic that plays in the subtext because her character loves music, but she is going deaf. And so eventually, she won't be able to hear what makes her feel alive. And with Adonis, if he gets injured badly enough, he won't be able to do what makes him feel alive, which is fight. The whole thing is a balancing act, and with every dynamic, there's a different kind of emotion that comes along with it. And there's no guarantee with any filmmaker that they'll get that right, that balancing act. But with Coogler, he somehow found the sweet spot and made it work so well. And he also freshened things up technically, where we got, for instance, a very inspiring one-take fight scene that is so just beautiful and totally nerdy for people like me who love single-take scenes. And then there's also, like for every new fighter that is introduced in the story, there's a freeze frame that shows all their stats, and it's pretty cool stuff. A favorite moment I have is this brief montage during the final fight, when Coogler cuts to Stallone, then Thompson, and then Rashad, as they all say a brief one line of support for Jordan. And it's one of those things that on paper could sound very cheesy, and probably did, but the way it was pulled off was very emotional and energizing, and made me want Adonis to kick major ass. My notes for improvement fall under the editing and character motivation build-up. In the beginning, there's a very brief scene where we see Adonis at a desk job post a fight, with his fists showing the after effects of that fight. It is the scene where he decides he wants to be a fighter for a living and not work in an office building, and that realization is powerful, but we never really see him working at that job. And so, while he doesn't want to be there, we aren't given the material to emotionally connect with that idea. Second and last is the editing, and this actually harkens back to that freeze frame I mentioned whenever a new fighter is brought into the story. It's one of those things that's kind of a mixed bag because it's cool to see the stats and not be told the stats, but also whenever I saw one, it felt like one of those things that was thought up during post-production and not pre-production, and it didn't feel as well thought out as it could have been. Now, having said all of that, my overall feeling on Creed is that it is damn good for a second feature film. Bravo, Ryan Coogler. And I think this is worthy of the Rocky canon. I give Creed 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you very much for your time. Seriously, I appreciate it. Have an awesome day.